Zira was a young girl living in a small town with her mother, Hugo. Every day, Hugo would remind Zira how unfortunate she felt since becoming a single mother, often saying that no man wanted to marry her because of it. This deeply hurt Zira, and she prayed to God to bless her mother with a husband. Years passed, and Hugo eventually married Afam, who became Zira's stepfather. However, Afam was a cruel man. He often shouted at Zira and treated her harshly. Whenever Zira cried and wished for her mother to protect her, Hugo remained silent, doing nothing to help. This left Zira feeling lonely and sad. When Zira was just 7 years old, her stepfather began to hurt her in ways she couldn't understand. Each day, Zira hoped she would wake up from this terrible nightmare. She tried to tell her mother about the abuse, but Hugo only told her to be proud of becoming a woman. One day, Hugo called Zira aside and insisted that no one must know about the abuses. She explained that she couldn't send away the only man who had agreed to marry her. Instead, she suggested that Zira should run away from them. Years went by, and Hugo realized that Afam would never change. Growing increasingly worried for her daughter, she confronted him, demanding that he leave Zira alone. Afam laughed mockingly and replied that it was because of Zira that he had agreed to marry her in the first place. Zira, who had been standing just behind the door, overheard this shocking conversation. Feeling a surge of determination, she decided it was time to take action and run away. One day, a man named Chidi came to the town for a contract job. He was friendly and kind to Zira, and she felt like she had found a friend. Chidi would often bring her little gifts and talk to her when she felt lonely. One day, he said to her, "Zira, you don't deserve to be treated this way. Why don't you come with me to the city? I can take care of you." Zira was scared at first, but she thought about how unhappy she was at home. She wanted a chance to be happy, so she agreed. One night, she packed her things quietly and left with Chidi. At first, life in the city was exciting. Chidi took Zira to his home and treated her well. He bought her new clothes, took her to different places, and promised to help her go to school. Zira felt happy for the first time in a long time and thought that she had made the right decision. But as time passed, things began to change. Chidi started spending most of his time at a gambling house. At first, he was winning money, and everything seemed fine. But one day, Chidi lost a big game. He came home angry and upset. "I lost everything," he said, pacing back and forth. "But don't worry, I'll win it back." Zira felt worried. "Chidi, you should stop gambling," she said. "It's dangerous." But Chidi didn't listen. He kept gambling, and every time he lost, he grew angrier. Then one night, he came home with a terrible idea. "The only way I can get out of this trouble is if you help me," he told Zira. "How can I help?" Zira asked, worried. "You have to go to a hotel and meet the man I lost the game to," Chidi said. "You have to make him happy, or else I'm in big trouble." Zira felt her heart sink. "No, I don't want to," she said, tears filling her eyes. But Chidi shouted, "You have to. I need this, Zira. You owe me." Feeling trapped, Zira agreed, and from that day on, her life became miserable. Chidi continued to gamble, and every time he lost, he would make Zira go to different hotels to meet his gambling opponents. Zira felt like she was stuck in a nightmare. Years passed, and Zira felt tired and broken. She could no longer take the life Chidi had forced her into. One night, she made a decision. She packed her things and ran away, leaving nothing behind. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to escape. As she walked through the city, hungry and exhausted, she came across a small park. She sat on a bench and cried, feeling lost and alone. That's when a kind man named Mr. Ben found her. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. Zira shook her head. "No, I'm not," she whispered. She felt safe with Mr. Ben, so she told him everything about her stepfather, about Chidi, and about how she had run away. Mr. Ben listened carefully and then said, "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I will help you." He took Zira to his home, gave her food, and promised to take care of her. Zira couldn't believe how kind he was. Mr. Ben treated her like a sister and a friend, and for the first time in years, she felt safe and loved. As time passed, Mr. Ben and Zira grew closer. One day, he asked her, "Zira, would you like to be part of my family? I want to marry you and give you a happy life." Zira felt tears of happiness in her eyes. "Yes," she said, smiling. "I would love that." But just as Zira was beginning to feel hopeful, Chidi found out where she was. He had been searching for her ever since she ran away, and when he saw that she was living with a wealthy man, he grew jealous. "I will make her pay," he said to himself. "And I will take everything Mr. Ben has." Chidi showed up one morning when Zira was alone and told her his plan. "You will help me eliminate Ben so that we can take all of his money," he demanded. "If you don't, I'll make your life miserable again." Zira felt afraid, but this time, she was not alone. She went to Mr. Ben and told him everything. "Chidi wants me to steal from you," she said, trembling. "But I don't want to do it. I don't want to be like him." Mr. Ben held her hand and said, "Don't worry, Zira. We will handle this together. How did he enter my house? He must be a dangerous being." Mr. Ben and Zira went to the police and told them about Chidi's plan. The police listened and made a plan to catch him. "When he comes back, we'll be ready," they said. The next night, Chidi returned, thinking that Zira was going with their plan. He entered the room and found Mr. Ben lying on the ground. "Bravo," Chidi said to Zira. "You've done a great job. I knew I trained you well." He stepped closer to Zira and gripped her throat tightly. "Where does he keep his money? Speak, or I will eliminate you too." Just as Chidi was about to say more, the police emerged from the rooms and quickly arrested him. "You're under arrest," they said, putting handcuffs on him. Chidi struggled and shouted, "You can't do this. She belongs to me." "No," Zira said, standing tall. "I belong to myself. And I am free now." As the news spread, Zira's mother, who had been searching for her daughter for years, saw the story on TV. She learned that Zira was getting married to Mr. Ben, a kind and wealthy man. "I have to find her," she said. On the day of Zira and Mr. Ben's wedding, Zira's mother showed up. She walked toward Zira with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I should have protected you from your stepfather. Please, forgive me." Zira felt pain in her heart. She remembered all the times her mother had stayed silent and done nothing. She ordered the bouncers to take her away. But Mr. Ben took her hand and said, "Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to forgive. But it's also the most powerful." Zira thought about his words, and then she hugged her mother. "I forgive you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "What about Afam, your husband?" Zira asked, tears welling in her eyes. Hugo responded, her voice trembling, "After you left, Afam began to treat me like a punching bag. One day, he hit me so hard that I fell and lost consciousness. He tried to escape, but the neighbors heard the noise and called the police. When I regained myself, I told them everything he had done to both of us. Because of my testimony, he was sentenced to life in prison. That serves him right, but please, never leave me again," Zira said to her mother. "I promise," her mother said, hugging her tightly. Zira and Mr. Ben had a beautiful wedding, surrounded by friends and family. They lived happily together, and Zira finally had the life she always dreamed of. She knew that no matter how hard things had been, she was now free, loved, and strong. And whenever she felt scared, she would remind herself of one thing: she had faced her fears, and had won. Moral lessons of the story. Zira's journey shows that even when life is tough and full of challenges, having the courage to stand up for yourself and make a change can lead to a better future. She faced difficult situations with her stepfather, Chidi, and her mother, but she didn't give up. The story teaches that forgiveness can be a powerful way to heal and move forward. Despite the pain her mother caused her, Zira found it in her heart to forgive, which allowed them to rebuild their relationship.